Today is Friday, August 9th, 2013, and I'm here at the home of Bill Stewart in Port Hueneme, California, talking to him about his long and distinguished career in the U.S. military. Bill is 87 years young, as his birthday is April 24th, 1926. Bill enlisted in the U.S. Navy on December 13th, 1943, and also served as a Marine in Vietnam. He retired in 1979 with the rank of Lieutenant Commander. Bill counts the American Theater Medal, World War II Victory Ribbon, the Cross of Gallantry, the Vietnam Service Medal, Dan V. Boi Tink, a Vietnam Civil Service Medal, and Chen Dec Vietnam, a Republic of Vietnam Campaign Medal as honors. I'm Elizabeth Lee, and I will be interviewing Bill on behalf of the Conejo Valley National Society Daughters of the American Revolution for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. Ed Lynch of Advanta Videography will be taping the interview. Okay, Bill, let's start out by talking a little bit about where you were born, where you grew up, something about, your formative years.
First, my name is William Bullock Stewart, Jr. I'm one of 4 children born to a U.S. Army officer. I was born in Manila in the Sternberg Hospital in the Philippine Islands, April 24th, 1926. And I always tell people about how I was born in the Philippines and went to school in Hawaii. When I was living in Hawaii, Amelia Earhart, the female aviatrix, flew through, so I brag about that, seeing her. They let us out of school.
How old were you when she came through?
I was 9 years old.
Okay, so you don't remember a lot about that.
No.
Do you remember anything they told you about it, or?
No, I just remember they let us out of school to see her.
But you knew who she was?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And then the first 4-engine clipper ship came through. And so I was bragging to somebody in my office about seeing the first 4-engine clipper ship, and he said, "Oh, I know all about it. I changed the spark plugs on it."
What's the Bullock for? That's your middle name? Is that a family name?
Yes, a family name, Bullock.
Okay. Who in your family are you named for? Who's Bullock named for? You know?
I don't know. I know we're supposed to be related to the guy that invented the telephone, and my mother's always bragging about all the darn ancestors overseas, and that doesn't make us any better. I mean, she really got into this genealogy.
What did she find out?
Well, she said, "You're related to Mary Queen of Scots, King Richard the Lionhearted, and all this stuff, you know."
Oh, because of Stewart, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever get involved in genealogy?
No, I'm not into it.
Okay. But you have some other interesting hobbies.
Well, my hobbies are, I have a pilot's license, I have an amateur radio license, I've been a Boy Scout master, and then I sing. I'm the 1999 karaoke senior champion. I'm singing at the county fair Saturday in the youth building, and I've been a member of the Navy CB choir for 52 years. And I've been singing in choir since 1946, and I love to sing, and I love to dance too. And it's funny, my dad said that it was sissified. He was against it, but my mother loved to sing and dance. I took after my mother.
What do you dance? Ballroom?
Well, I used to hitchhike to the Palladium in Hollywood every weekend during World War II when I was stationed out here, and I do everything. You know, I do South American, I do jitterbug, I waltz, whatever, tango, rumba, whatever you want.
What was the Palladium like then?
We had all the top name bands at the Palladium, you know, Charlie Barnett, Stan Kenton, Ralph Flanagan, McGray brother, all the top bands. And I'd have 50 dance partners a night. I didn't know any of their names, but
Did they have dance cards, or how did you do that?
No, in those days you could tap the guy on the shoulder and he had to release the girl. Now they're liable to slug you for doing that. But in those days they had to release the girl, so you tapped someone on the shoulder if you wanted to dance with them.
Was it packed? I mean, what did it look like in there?
Oh yeah, it was packed. Oh yeah, and we're all in uniform, you know, during the war.
Oh, so most of the people were in uniform?
All the men are in uniform, yeah.
Dress uniform? usually, right?
Well, we have all kinds of different stages of uniforms. It's dress blue uniform. With the real dress uniform is called a dress met. You just wear that for special occasions with a cut-off bottom. Of course, in those days, I was wearing my sailor suit.
Yeah, which was?
With a neckerchief and the back part, and
Ah.
the sleeves with 3 stripes on it.
So do you sing music from that era?
Yeah, I used to, when I hitchhiked, we had Hit Parade magazine, and I used to cut the music out and put it in my billfold and take it out and memorize it while I was hitchhiking.
Did you sing when you got to the Palladium? Did you get up there?
No, I didn't sing at the Palladium.
And when you sing now, you sing, what do you sing? Like at the county fair and stuff, what are you going to sing?
Well, I won the 1999 karaoke championship singing I've Got You Under My Skin. The county fair, I'm singing Old Man River and Chattanooga Choo Choo.
Okay. And I've Got You Under My Skin is by
It's Frank Sinatra.
Frank Sinatra. Yeah. I wanted to say that because people who watch the tape may not know some of the older songs. So you sing a lot of Frank Sinatra, right?
He's my man.
And your dad said the dancing or the singing was sissified?
Well, he didn't state that, but he kind of implied that, because I don't know what happened. They'd go to parties, and my dad would just stand in the back talking about how big a fish he caught on the weekend, and my mother would be dancing with all the guys.
So tell me a little bit about your mom and dad. What were they like?
Well, both their fathers were civil engineers, and my dad's father decided he'd be more successful farming. So my dad talks about taking the cattle and the sheep to market, and it wasn't exotic like they show in the movies where you're riding a horse, and
Yeah.
he was riding the freight cars, and he said it was pretty
Stinky.
pretty smelly.
Yeah.
And then but they donated the land for the high school, and then my mother's father was chief engineer for the World's Fair in 1903, and I told about how they had 14 governors and the president at their home, and the story about how my mother complained, instead of bragging about having the president in their home, was complaining about his table manners.
Yeah.
Talking about Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah. So I was going to say, yeah, and for people who are listening to the tape, Teddy Roosevelt was one of the Rough Riders. I don't know a lot about the Rough Riders.
Yeah.
Do you know
He
anything?
was a very famous guy. He's the one that got the Panama Canal going, and he was a Rough Rider, and a very famous guy, great guy. And for her to insult him, I couldn't believe it.
Well, I don't know if she was insulting him. She was just commenting on his etiquette. I think that's what it was. Did you like moving around a lot? Because you lived in a lot of places, right?
Well, I lived in Hawaii 3 years, lived in the Philippines 3 years, I lived in New Jersey 4 years, Washington, D.C. a year, Colorado 4 years, California a year and a half, Texas a year and a half.
Which was your favorite?
Which was my favorite?
Yeah, did you like any place the best?
I don't really have any favorites. I like everywhere I go. I like people, I like to talk, I like moving around, and visiting places.
Moving around, though, when we met on Monday, you told me that influenced you a little bit in how you raised your own family, right? Your experiences.
Well, the problem with moving around is that you don't grow up with the same people, so if you're like running for an office, you're not going to make it. Whereas I kept my family here through 8 sets of military orders, and so I had 2 children that were student body presidents, 2 that were class presidents, and the rest were presidents of organizations. And my sons all made Eagle Scout, all 4, and the daughters went to the top in Girl Scouting, the Gold Award. And then I had them in beauty contests and all that stuff. And then 3 years of movie work, and so
You did 3 years, or your kids did 3
the
years?
kids did 3 years of movie work. They were in My World and Welcome to It. My 3 sons, Brady Bunch. They were in the Hawaiians with Charlton Heston. They were in The Reavers with Steve McQueen. But after 3 years, it was too hard on the wife. I couldn't leave my office. So she was getting up at 3 and 4 in the morning, driving the location, and sometimes you'd have to sit down there for 8 or 10 hours just for 15 minutes shooting, and it's a rough old deal. We decided it was not a normal way to live, so
For the kids.
Yeah, so
And plus, I bet you weren't here too.
right,
You
I
were.
was gone.
Yeah, so that made it doubly hard, I guess.
Yeah.
So your kids are very accomplished. I want to talk about that later, but also so are your siblings, right? Let's.
Well, my sister was a principal speechwriter for one of our men that ran for U.S. Senator.
Dole? Was it
Dole.
Dole?
And my other sister was married to a fellow with an MD and an MDiv, and they spent most of their lives in Africa as missionaries, except for a short tour in Belgium where he's taking a course in tropical medicine. My brother, in charge of a pathology lab at Stormont Vale Hospital in Topeka, and so that's my sister.
So those
my
three, though,
sibling.
they did not go into the military, is that correct?
I'm the only one of my family that went in the military, other than my dad, who put a career in 35 years, World War I, World War II in Korea.
What did he do during that time?
What
was
did
he
I
doing
do?
then?
What?
Your dad?
What did my dad do?
Yeah.
He was an oral surgeon. He put jaws back together. That's what I went into for a while too. Fractured faces.
So why do you think you're the only one that went into the military?
Well, World War II got me, and the rest of them were. My brother was 14 years younger than I am, so he didn't have to go in.
Did you get any pressure from your family to enlist? You enlisted, right?
No, I wanted to go in. I felt it was the thing to do. My dad said he had to sign the papers because I was 17, and he said, "Son, is this really what you want?" I said, "Yes, sir." So he signed the papers and got up and walked over the window, and that was it, And he thought I might get killed because, they were killing young guys. A lot of young guys were getting shot.
So did he not want you to enlist, do you think?
Well, he's a real dedicated military man. He was proud of me that I wanted to go in.
How about your mom?
She was a very devoted wife to my dad, and it was the old school, where the woman was subjugated to the desires and wills of the male, whereas this family, my wife's a teacher, and she's equal and sometimes superior.
I hope she can hear that.
I had no idea what a smart woman I got. And the other day, I thought I was the brilliant person in repair here. I couldn't get the TV going, and she fiddled with it, and she got the TV work. I couldn't believe she fixed the TV. Oh.
You also told me once that you thought you really got your money's worth, right? Because of she put you through dental school.
Oh yeah, she taught school while I was in dental. I had what they call an Engine HP program where they gave you a little bit of money, but not a whole lot. And by her teaching, we didn't have any problems with money. We had a nice car and a nice place to live. But boy, it costs money now to go to professional school. Oh, wow.
Yeah, tell me about it. So when you enlisted, you did not choose the same branch of service that your dad did.
Well, when I went in as enlisted man, I was interested in the medical field, so I went into the hospital corps. So I was a hospital corpsman, and my first duty was working on a ward, taking care of patients and giving penicillin shots all day long, and then I went into surgical technicians training. And when I was stationed here, they were short people at St. Francis Hospital in Santa Barbara, so they borrowed from the Navy, and so I went up there and worked at the Cottage Hospital in Santa Barbara as a surgical technician. Then they needed crash ambulance drivers. I don't know how this happened, but somehow or other I got roped into being a crash ambulance driver on the on the airstrip there. I had a variety of stuff
Was
going
that in
on.
basic? That wasn't in basic training. That was, or in advanced training. That was just, when was that?
Well, my basic, in those days, they call it boot camp in the Navy. I went to Great Lakes Naval Training Center for my initial training, and then I went to a hospital corps school in San Diego.
Okay, and that's where you were the crash ambulance driver?
No, that was later when I got into the crash ambulance.
So the hospital corps school, what were you doing there?
Well, they gave us a kind of a shortened medical thing, taught us how to take temperatures and pulse respiration and how to write up medical charts, and you know.
When you enlisted, are you able to say in the Navy at that time, were you able to say you wanted to be a hospital corpsman, or?
Well, they wanted to make me a motor machinist mate on a submarine.
Oh yeah.
I had no interest in submarines, and I had no interest in being a machinist mate. So I told them, I said, I'm interested in medical. So I talked him into sending me down to San Diego to hospital corps school.
Oh, that was after your boot camp.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And then, where did you go after that?
Well, I went to Long Beach Naval Hospital, and then I came up here to Port Hueneme,
Okay.
and they put me in what they call an acorn outfit.
Okay. And when did you go to dental school?
Well, I left out that I went to the Naval Academy, right?
Yeah, didn't you go to Annapolis?
I went to the Naval Academy for 3 years, and then I went into, as I said, the Engine HP program to go to dental school.
Okay.
And I got married, and then when I finished dental school, I applied for and got a naval internship at St. Albans Naval Hospital, and then I ventured into oral maxillofacial surgery, and then they also gave me training in general anesthesia.
Okay. So during World War II, did they send you out to see or?
I was really lucky well, for some reason, they put me in what they call an acorn outfit, Aviation Construction Ordnance Repair Unit,
Okay.
and sent me up to San Francisco, or Oakland, actually. And then my appointment, well, I had to go to a preparatory school first. They took the older guys and they just put us through a couple of months preparatory school at Camp Perry, Virginia, and then we ended up at Bainbridge, Maryland, to go to the academy. And then I was awarded a fleet appointment. There were 200 men selected up from the ranks for appointment to the Naval Academy. And then I got into that Engine HP program, went to dental school. Then I took my internship, and it just goes on and on.
We've got a picture of this. What point was?
I was a midshipman in the Naval Academy when that was taken.
That's at Annapolis.
Annapolis.
Yeah. And what about
And
this?
This is when I was enlisted hospital corpsman.
And each of these the uniforms are. Is this the one you wore dancing?
Yeah, that's my sailor suit, and this is my midshipman's uniform.
Now, weren't you aboard the USS Wisconsin and the USS?
I was on 7 ships.
Yeah.
My first ship was a battleship, the USS Wisconsin, BB-64. I took it to Europe in 1947. My second ship was an aircraft carrier, the Coral Sea, and my third ship was the Bear, which was a troop transport. While I was on the Bear, I took amphibious training at Little Creek, Virginia. And the guys I went through training with, I lucked out. In the Korean War, the guys I went through training with, they killed 40% of the guys that I trained with. I lucked out by going back to school, or I would have been out there with them. So I lucked out, but I felt kind of guilty that I got out of combat by... So later on, I volunteered to go to Vietnam, and I ended up spending 40 months in Vietnam, counting everything, sea duty and 3rd Marine Division duty. And
I want to talk about that later, but you said you had lots of stories on your ships. You've been on 7 ships. You want to tell us some of the stories that you can remember?
Oh, yeah, okay, I'll tell one. We were in England, the war had ended, and I'm a singer, and I was singing in the shower, and the guy ahead of the program said, "You're on my program." So I sang for the head of the British Navy, Admiral Lord Fraser.
Really?
he was real famous. He sank the Scharnhorst. That was his big deal. So I'm feeling real scared about getting up on stage, and I wasn't a drinker, but they decided to give me a slug of whiskey. So they gave me a glass of whiskey, and boy, it went right to my head, and I got up there on stage, and man, I was totally relaxed.
Are you going to sing for us later?
Whatever
Or
you
sing
like.
for us now?
Well, the song that I won the 1999 karaoke championship.
Yeah.
I've got you under my skin. I've got you deep in the heart of me. So deep in my heart that you're really a part of me. I've got you under my skin. I'd sacrifice anything come what might for the sake of having you near, in spite of a warning voice that comes in the night and repeats in my ear. Don't you know, little fool, you never can win. Use your mentality, wake up to reality. But each time I do, just the thought of you makes me stop before I begin. 'Cause I've got you under my skin. 'Cause I've got you under my skin.
Well, I can see what you want. You've got a beautiful lower register, too. Not that many people have that.
Thank you.
So tell me, what were you doing on these ships? What happened on the ships and all that?
Well, the one thing I remember about the battleship, I had a general quarters station and a gun tub on the after stack, and that sulfur dioxide fume used to get in my lungs and my eyes and bother me, so I complained. So they switched me to an air-conditioned plotting room for the 5-inch mounts where I had to turn switches. And they lock you in what they call condition Zebrew, condition Zulu, watertight integrity. So I don't know what's scarier, being in a gun tub out where you can see action, or whether you're down below decks, locked in,
Yeah.
where all you got for a restroom is a sandbox.
Oh, jeez. So on that ship, you weren't practicing medicine, right?
No, I was in training as a midshipman.
Okay.
And then my next ship, the carrier, we were getting training flying as air crewmen in TBMs. And
TBMs?
TBM, torpedo bombers, the thing that President Bush crashed in. And we had a power failure on a takeoff and almost crashed. For the last minute, it finally grabbed hold. And that particular airplane, they didn't design it right, and so the partition between the gunner and in his bubble and the radioman, the lock was on the far side. So if the gunner got killed, if the radioman got killed, and the gunner's trapped, and that's what happened to President Bush when his plane went down. They lost the radioman and the gunner because they hadn't designed that thing. They had a little place on the side of the turret for the gunner to get out, but it was too small if you weighed over 90 pounds. So you had to go back through the radioman's compartment. But that little lock there only worked on the other side. They finally redesigned it, the Confederate Air Force out of Camarillo. Now that it's been through a couple of wars and a lot of guys have died, they finally...
Unfortunately, yeah. And then what others, you had other ships too.
Well,
These ships were during which war? World War II or Korean? Just so, because you've had such a long...
Well, in the late 40s on up to...
the Korean was...
later on, it is the 40s, these ships, and the third ship was the Bayer, which is troop transport, and that's the one that I had amphibious training out of, where we had to go down the cargo net and take a Higgins boat and hit the beach and all that kind of trash. And then my fourth ship was a converted Spanish-American warship, the Reina Mercedes. It was a troop transport. And my next ship was out here, the Norton Sound, which was a converted seaplane tender. It was a guided missile test ship. And we test fired the first nuclear warhead on a guided missile in May of '62. We fired at Christmas Island. And then, let's see, my next ship was the Delta. I flew out to the Philippines to catch it. It was a repair ship, converted Japanese freighter. And my last ship was the first nuclear cruiser, the USS Long Beach. It was 731 feet long, and now the Congress didn't want to build any more of that size, so they took frigates, which were only 565 feet, and made them into what they call cruisers.
So over what period of time were you on these ships, just so I can kind of get it in my mind?
Well, the 40s, and then my last ships were in the, uh, let's see now, I'm going to get confused here, 66 and 7, wait a minute now. Well, when I came out here for the Long Beach, it was 61. Uh, well, up to 60, let's see, when was I on the Long Beach? 70, no, that was the Norton Sound, 61. 72, 73 was my last ship, was the USS Long Beach.
So the ones in the early, in the 40s, like the USS Wisconsin and the USS Coral Sea and so forth.
I was in training as a midshipman.
Yeah, and they were, you were not, were they in any kind of battles? Or,
No,
but where did they
my
go?
last ship was in, we went to Europe and back.
Okay, for what purpose?
Well, we're just visiting foreign ports.
Okay. Were you picking people up? Is that what they were? Or the different ships?
They have a regular crew, and then we were in training as midshipmen.
Okay.
But my last ship saw combat. We shot tailless missiles into the hillside, and we had Piper Cubs with extended wing tanks as spotter planes. My wife got all excited about that. She said, "You were just blindly firing missiles?" No, we had spotters. I'm going to have to straighten her out on that. She was upset with me on that. And we picked up down naval aviators. We fired tailless missiles, shot down MiGs, and so we got a presidential unit citation and a meritorious unit citation and a Navy unit commendation, all that junk that they gave us. And,
What was your role in all that on this ship?
I had 3 roles. I was a dental officer, and then they made me court-martial officer. I was in charge of court-martials. And then they made me special services officer. I was in charge of all ship tours and parties. And I had to build a gymnasium. And then when we were over in Japan, I had to get a ship's band going. I had to go into Tokyo and buy band instruments. And as I said, convert this one space. But what's funny, they made me the popcorn officer.
The popcorn officer.
And they bring all this popcorn aboard, and they didn't give me a place to put it. And finally, I put it in the Admiral's baggage room. The Admiral wasn't on board then. So they put a lock on it, and the Admiral's aide came aboard and wanted to know why there was a note on that said you had to call the dental officer to get permission to go in the Admiral's room. Well, luckily, the Admiral never did take over.
How much popcorn did they send you?
I think I had $1,000 worth of popcorn.
And what did you use it for? Movies?
Well, at first I charged money, and then finally I figured the heck with it. I just gave it away for free to the ship. Like submarines give away free ice cream, well, on my ship we gave away free popcorn.
What ship was that?
The USS Long Beach.
So, tell us about the court-martial.
Well, the way that started, they didn't think I had enough to do up here when I was stationed here, and they first put me as a member of the board the first year. That's what they call a collateral duty. They don't think you have enough to do, so they give you extra stuff to do. Well, the first court-martial we had was really bad. One of the machinist's mate wives off the ship decided when he had the duty that she was going to have some extracurricular activities, so she'd go to the commissary and buy groceries and pretend like she didn't have a car and then get a ride to her home, and she started a prostitution ring. And this thing was a real mess. It involved local police activity and civic. It was a real horrible mess. So it would have been all over the papers and all over television in those days, but they swept it under the rug. It was worse than tailhook in Vegas, if you ever heard about tailhook. And so I started out as just a member of the court, and then a year later, they decided should be in charge. So I went from being a member to where I was the guy in charge. For the next two ships, I ran the court martials. And I remember one court martial, I felt sorry for the guy. I thought he was entrapped. He signed paperwork, things that happened when we got him before the court. He denied what he told me. And I had a signed statement. So we had to hang him then because, you know, he lied to me during the pretrial investigation. So then I felt sorry for another guy because he grew up when his dad was had seen combat as a Navy chief, and I thought, well, during his formative years, his dad wasn't there, and so I decided to help him out. Well, he rewarded me by taking a 45 and trying to shoot up a OB/GYN unit of a dispensary. So he went nuts, crazy. So after that, I was. But on the other hand, I've got to tell an incident that happened in Vietnam. One of my men went ashore over the hill, came back drunk, and took a loaded 45 and held it up against another man's temple. So I had to make up my mind now. Do I take the gun away, or what do I do? Well, if I try to get the gun away, someone will get shot. So I talked him into putting the gun away. Then the next thing, I had to figure out, do I finish this guy's life by putting him in the brig and putting him on report for what he did, or do I give him another chance? So I turned to the other people and I said, I'll leave it up to you. Normally I'm pretty hard-nosed, but this guy's been a hard worker, he's a good guy, and I'm for giving him another chance, but I'm going to leave it up to you. And they decided to let him, and then after that he was a model officer, no more problem. But
Why did he do it? Do you know?
Well, when you're in combat, we had guys deliberately shooting themselves. People go crazy in combat. You don't see this in the papers, but there's a lot of that going on. The guys, and you read about how some of them are committing suicide.
Yeah.
Yeah, combat does funny things to people. Now, my dad being a career Army officer, I was brought up very strictly, and combat didn't bother me at all. I just, it's just another part of my life.
Did you see, you were fortunate enough, or maybe unfortunate, to go through a number of different conflicts like that, from World War II to Vietnam. Did you, well, you would have seen the people in combat coming from World War II, even though you weren't over there. Did you see a difference in how people reacted over time?
Well, my World War II exposure was to people that were wounded. I remember this one guy being on a ship that was torpedoed, and his foot torn the Achilles tendon off his foot. In those days, they didn't know what to do. Nowadays, they can repair that. I remember feeling really sorry for the guy. And my first duty, I might as well tell it. My first duty, I was on a combined dermatology venereal disease ward and given penicillin shots. In those days, the penicillin, nowadays it's just 1 or 2 shots. But in those days, you had to give it, because it wasn't in the beeswax, you had to give it every 3 hours, day and night.
Oh, gee. For how long?
And the first disease, which we call, gonorrhea, there was a 2-day treatment, day and night, and then Louis, syphilis, was a 7-day treatment. You had to give them shots day and night for 7 days. So they looked like human pin cushions when you got through with them.
And you didn't have to do that later?
What was that?
When did they change that so that you didn't?
Well, nowadays the penicillin, just a couple of shots takes care of it now.
Are there any other, what about the state of the enlisted guys? I mean, did you see a difference between how people reacted to the war in Vietnam versus something like World War II? Was there a difference in the people or how they felt about it or anything like that?
Well, you know how the Korean War, people were mistreated. Vietnam, Vietnam too, people were not happy with Vietnam, but of course nowadays the country's behind the military, but they weren't happy with the military. I was glad I flew back rather than come back. Well, I flew through an Air Force base, so I didn't get all this bad treatment that you read about, how people were spitting on people and cussing them out and bad stuff. And,
Did the people in the service, did they feel differently about themselves, do you think, because of that, than like your patients and everybody?
no, we felt that we were supporting our country. We wanted to help the country out. The country decided that we should.
Because you don't hear about that many people, like you were saying in Vietnam, they were shooting themselves in the foot to get out and all that. You don't hear about that as much in World War II, or maybe people just didn't talk
We
about
had
it.
really bad stuff happen in World War II, where we had commanders uh, in competition with each other and deliberately not give a password, and then we ended up shooting at our own airplanes. Or
Oh,
I
I
don't know
didn't know
whether you
that.
heard all this
It's the
stuff.
first
Yeah.
No, I
Well,
haven't
I
heard
heard this
this.
stuff because as dentist people, when I gave them an anesthesia, they start telling me all this stuff. You don't
Yeah.
read about it in the papers. Yeah.
What kinds of things did you hear that you can talk about that really stick in your mind?
Well, you know, as I said, when we were shooting at our own people, or
Yeah.
um, no, I don't want to really get into it.
Okay. So when you went to dental school, that's where something really special happened in terms of your romantic life, right? Right before dental school?
You know, my wife waited 4 years to have the first baby, and then when we started in, she had 5 babies in 4 years and 5 months, and then two more after that.
Prolific.
And then you heard about how she put 5 of them in the military, right?
Yeah, I want you to talk about that later. I want to talk a little
Okay.
bit more about some other parts of your service too, though. Or we can talk about it now. It doesn't matter. But yeah, you have really Let's talk about it now. You have really interesting kids.
Well, our daughter was one of the first West Point graduate women. She retired as commanding officer of the Army Information Technology Center, and she was a jump master. So she outdid her husband. She got a star on her jump wing. She never got one on his. Now she's in the baby business with 4 children. And our son got Chip Hand of the Year award for the Atlantic Fleet. He's now at the Pentagon. And then other son helped set up field hospitals in the Middle East, and he's now Deputy Secretary to the Surgeon General of the Army in the Pentagon. We had three decided, two got out on around 10 years, and three stayed in and retired. And, but my wife loved the military, and she's the one that encouraged them to go in. And we have, you know, an Annapolis grad, two West Point grads, ROTC grad, and one went to medical school under the Army training program. So we got our money's worth out of it.
And you didn't pressure them yourself to.
No.
So you must have set a really good example.
I think Boy Scouting helped, though. They were all in scouting, and they knew how to camp out. And then my daughter tells about how by having 3 girls in one bedroom and 4 boys in another bedroom, it taught them how to get along with other people. And then we're in a multicultural area here, all races and religions. So they had no problem with, you know, race or religion when they were in the military.
You said earlier on the tape that you really felt kind of guilty because you saw no combat in World War II
Right,
and during the
yeah.
Korean War because you were in dental school or doing an
Yeah, I was
internship
in
or
the
whatever.
reserve then.
So you joined the Marines. Well,
They told me I was, it's funny, I was with the Seabees. They said, you're really too old to be a Seabee in combat. So they sent me to Camp Pendleton, and I went through Marine training when I was 39 years old, and I went to Vietnam when I was 40.
Okay, talk to us a little bit about your time in Vietnam.
Well, I was involved in civic action, and we'd fly all over the place, and we'd take care of not only our own people, but the enemy and civilian population. And,
Where were you based?
well, my 2 main bases were, I was at Charlie Med in Da Nang, and then I was at Baker Med in Phu Bai.
So for people who are going to see this later who didn't grow up in the 70s or the 60s, you want to explain what a Charlie Med is?
So that's a field hospital.
Okay. What's it look like?
Well, in the beginning, you haven't got anything, and then the Seabees come out and they build you tents and put down wooden walkways, and we'd get a whole truck, sometime a whole truckload of casualties in, and the big old circus tent, we'd have people lying on stretchers all over the place being operated on. When you first pick the guys up, and you do just definitive stuff. You know, if they got a hole in their lung, you seal the hole. If they have a fracture, you put a splint on. And that's out in the field, battalion aid station. The guys pick them up out in the field in the battalion. Now, Korean War, they were picked up by ambulance. In the Vietnam War, we had helicopters
Okay.
to bring them in. And then, so we'd take care of them, the first stage when they're out in the field is stop the flow of blood, take care of the fracture. Then when you get them to the field hospital, you try to do more definitive stuff. But like we had one guy, he threw a hand grenade over his bunker and it didn't go off right away, so then he poked his head over to see why, and then it went off. Took his jaw off, ripped his tongue up, and so anyway, in this case, we found out the hard way that you don't remove all the bone. When we were first trained, we were trained to remove all loose bone. So I remember I was working on the face here, and I grabbed a hold, and the next thing you know, his whole face is starting to fall apart. No, you don't. Just take little splintered bone out, but the main stuff, you try to tie it together as best as you can. And then we had over to call it C4 Hospital down in Da Nang, and they try to take care of, do more definitive work. But then the stuff that goes on for a year, we had about 5 hospitals we sent them to. I had to divide it up.
You split your time among them, or
big pardon?
did you split your time among the 5?
Yeah, I split. I sent some to the Philippines trip, and I sent some to Hawaii, some to Japan. And then back here in the States, we had a hospital up San Francisco, Presidio, and then we had San Diego, the hospital there. In Japan, we had Sasebo and Yokosuka Naval Hospital. The Philippines, let's see, we had, was it Tripler? We had the Air Force Hospital there. And then in Hawaii. But I had to divide it up and fly them back to the different hospitals. We'd do the best we could for them in what we call in-country, and then we'd farm them out. And so then they had to have, like plastic surgery, if you got to rebuild, say, a piece of face, you do a split thickness graft where you have to take a piece of skin off here and you tie it here and leave it attached here until it reattaches to the face, and then you cut it loose and spread it out and sew it on.
So in the hospitals, did you have to do anything besides dental work? Did you have to?
Yeah, I had specialized training in general anesthesia, so I gave general anesthesia for amputations and chest surgery, fractures.
Did you work every day, or just when people came in, or how does that work?
Oh, we had patients coming in every day, yeah.
All night, all day?
Well, we try to take care of everything in the daytime, but, emergencies come in at night. And it's kind of funny. I remember I had the duty one night, and the patient came in about 2 or 3 in the morning, and I got a call, and I'd worked hard all day, and I was exhausted. And I remember I was living at home then, and the wife, boy, she jumped out of bed and stood there with both hands on her hips until I finally got up. And by the time I got to the dispensary, I was wide awake. And when I saw the poor guy, then I was glad I could help him out.
Where was this?
He'd been hit by a vehicle and had really torn his face up, and I had to take out fractured teeth and a wire bone and sew up skin and all that kind of stuff.
Where was it?
Well, I was here.
It was?
At the
At
Fort Hueneme.
Okay. How many people, getting back to Vietnam, how many people are in those hospitals?
How many people are in the hospital?
Yeah, how many medical staff do you have to operate or to take care of people? Not very many?
We have all these different departments,
Oh, okay.
We got, OBGYN, but I forgot what I was going to say. Well, the anesthesia, we call them services. The anesthesiology service was the best service I ever worked with because they all tried to get along, whereas in general surgery, the guys were, I don't know, competitive. And
About what?
who was the top one and who should get the
gee.
best cases and all that kind of stuff.
So you also, it sounded like, got in the helicopter and went out
Yeah, we flew
on the
out.
field in combat, right?
Yeah.
What,
And
what
then
was,
the other thing we did was we went out on what we call missions. We send out troops to flame people out of caves, and we'd be medical backup for anybody. We took care of the enemy as well as our own people.
so your medical backup also for the people that were in the caves in
Yeah.
case they were injured?
Yeah.
How did they treat you, the enemy?
How did they treat us?
Yeah, when you tried to help them, I mean, were they?
Well, they were grateful. I remember I got one fella in, and he thought I was going to kill him. He was scared to death. You know, he couldn't believe that I was actually going to help him. You know. Yeah.
How'd you calm him down?
But every once in a while, they try to avoid hitting our main hospitals because we took care of the enemy as well as our own people. But every once in a while, something would go wrong, and the mortars would come in and hit us, and it was kind of scary. Yeah.
Were you on the base when that happened?
Well, the first time the mortars came in, it was really wild. We had outside movies, and then we had outside restrooms. We were all standing in line for one of the restrooms, and suddenly mortars are coming in on us. And the first time, I didn't know what was going on. And suddenly I'm at the head of the line. I'd been at the rear of the line, and wondering, where did everybody go? Well, when we were in Da Nang, the coolie labor dug our trenches for us. But when we went up to Phu we had to dig our own trenches. Well, the enlisted men had theirs, and the chief petty officers had theirs. The officers were too lazy. We had no trenches. Well, when we first got hit, boy, we had to head for the trenches of the enlisted troops. And the next day, we were digging our own trenches.
So when you're out and all the action's going on and you're trying to help people in the field, just kind of describe that to me. What's that like?
What was
Yeah,
that?
when you're out there in combat trying to take care of the wounded, not back in your hospital at the base. What's it like out there with the troops?
What's it like with the troops?
Yeah, like what are you doing out there?
Well, we were filling sandbags.
Yeah.
We're taking care of whatever needs to be done. The guys not only when they're not getting hit, they've got the common cold, they got diarrhea, they got fungus. I mean, we take care of whatever needs to be taken care of. That's our duty in medical.
And when they take you out in the field, I mean, when you're out actually, when the fighting is going on, are you protected in any way, or are you vulnerable to everything?
We're vulnerable to everything, and not only that, we have some of our own people going crazy, starting to shoot up our own area. And fighting was usually within 15 miles of where we were set up.
Okay.
And,
And then when you said you went to help the enemy, you mentioned the caves, but did you also go into the villages to help them?
yeah.
Tell
Because the guys, the men would be out fighting in the villages, and just have the women and children there.
So you were mainly helping women and children at that point? When you went into the villages?
Yeah. We set up a aid station, and they come in to us.
Oh, okay. In the village you set up the aid station?
Yeah.
How many, did a lot of them come in? Like hundreds, or how many people?
Yeah, I remember one time we had 200 school children lined up out in the desert, and
Oh,
we were
really?
taking abscess teeth out, and just throwing them in the sand.
Oh my gosh.
And then we had skin disorders, and we had to big jar of ointment that had every antibiotic in it, and we just slathered on with tongue depressors.
Oh my gosh. So, what was the state of medicine like overseas? It's a lot
Pretty
different.
primitive.
Yeah. But you had the
But
basics of what you
and then
needed.
the real stuff, the bad stuff, we'd send them to the field hospital, and then eventually back to main hospitals. We just take care of the definitive stuff. Like if a guy's face is all torn up, we try to wire and sew things the best that we could.
And then after that, you went back to Port Hueneme. Did you go back into? Yeah. Did you? Were
Yeah,
you
I
there the
came
whole
back to
time?
Port Hueneme.
So you saw the entire Vietnam War. You served
Well,
during
I
the
was out
entire.
there 66 and 7, 71, 2 and 3.
Okay. And then your family would have been back in
Family's back.
California
My poor wife's taking care of 7 kids all by herself.
and taking them off
But I'm
to.
so proud of her. She made sure that they were active in scouting and church and did their schoolwork.
How many years have you guys been married?
How many years have you been married
Yeah.
now? 62 years.
That's pretty impressive. That's probably one of
I-
your
I'm
most
still in
impressive
love,
achievements. Yeah, I know you are.
She's
I've
a
seen you
great
with
cook
her.
and
We should bring her out here at some
she's
point and have her
smarter than I am, and
so we can see.
strong woman too. She can throw those water bottles up there.
What's the secret of a 62-year marriage?
But I was telling about how when I met her, she was the same height, weight, and age as Marilyn Monroe.
But we've seen her and she's prettier. That's what I told you.
I'd never seen a more beautiful woman. I was amazed that she would be friendly with me. But I had a good gift of gab being a Navy sailor.
So what's the secret of a 62-year-old marriage?
We pull together and we go to church every Sunday. They say you live longer and marriages last longer if you do go to church. Doesn't mean you have to go, but we do. And I belong to a lot of organizations. I keep her busy
With dances?
going to all those organizations. I belong to the Association of Naval Aviators, Association of Military Surgeons of the United States, Association of Military Retired Officers, Navy League. I'm a board member of the Chamber of Commerce. Scouting, though, I don't go scouting like I used to. I used to go out once a month, Boy Scouting.
So when you finished up your tour in Vietnam, did you come back to the Marines or did you come back to the Navy?
They decided to put me back in the Seabees.
Okay.
So I was a Marine briefly.
Yeah.
So I went through the training and I wore the uniform, so when they asked people to stand at parties, that I stand for both the Marine Corps and the Navy. Though I'm a retired Navy guy, but I
Yeah.
did serve in the Marines.
Do you have a branch of service that you like better? Do you like one better than the other?
I like my hobbies. I have a pilot's license. I thought flying was a lot of fun, but when I came back from Vietnam, I gave up flying.
How come?
I totally lost interest in it. We were getting shot at, and it was no longer fun, because it was a job then.
Yeah.
So when I came back, I just dropped it.
Did you fly helicopters or anything in Vietnam?
No, I was just auxiliary personnel in Vietnam.
Okay.
My license is single engine land. I'm not qualified to fly a helicopter. I just flew out to go to different, the pilots took us out and we picked up casualties. And
That kind of makes me wonder. Your dad was in the Army, right? Not the Air
right,
Force.
yeah.
I wonder why you didn't go for the Air Force.
My dad was a very strict guy. I didn't want any part of anything he'd ever been associated with. That's why I joined the Navy, to get away from the Army and the Air. He was with the old Army Air Corps. I wanted to be independent.
Okay. But you still loved airplanes.
Yeah.
Any other interesting stories from aboard ship? Or in
One
the
thing about flying, I had two buddies. You're taught in flying to be safe, pre-flight your airplane, and so I did everything right in flying, and as a result, I survived it. But my two buddies, they didn't. One of them didn't pre-flight his airplane, and he crashed, and the other one tried to see how close he could get to a mountain, and they both crashed. And I remember I was flying out of Lancaster, and they said, "Watch out on the left side. We've got skydivers." So I couldn't get up to the right altitude at first with so I did a go around. I thought, do I have the time? Well, I better obey the rules. The rules are 1,000-foot clearance. So I got up to my 1,000 and I hit a downdraft and I went down 500 feet. Now, if I hadn't obeyed the rules,
You would have smacked?
I'd be gone, yeah. My two buddies didn't obey the rules and they're both gone.
Oh, they didn't make it.
No.
Oh. Are these friends from your days in service, or?
Well, one was the brother of my current female friend. It's kind of funny. That gal, she was my girl during the war when I was a sailor, and when I got my appointment to the Naval Academy, you can't get married. Her dad said, "You better marry her because there's a pilot out to get her," and I said, "I can't. In the academy, you got to be single." Well, she'd been married twice, ended up with the same number of kids, 7 kids.
Oh, gee.
And then she's looking for husband number 3. Wrote a letter,
To you.
and I made the mistake of showing it to my wife, and that's the one time she got mad. Boy, she was.
I'd be mad.
She was. If I hadn't been a boxer, she'd have broken my jaw. Boy, she took the only time she swung at me, but boy, oh boy. So I learned then you don't brag about former girlfriends. You don't even show any interest in them. You don't. But anyway, she ended up with the same number of children, but through 2 marriages. Whereas I got my 7 through 1 marriage.
Yeah, good for you.
But she was the same. What was weird, she was a duplicate of my wife, blue-eyed blonde, same height. Both of them were juniors in college when they were 18. I mean, so many similarities.
So what we would say is that you have a type. A type.
Yeah, that's my type.
When were you boxing? When did you find time to
When
box?
I was stationed out here during the war, I went out for boxing, and I won the welterweight championship. And then when I went to the academy, they put me up against a guy that was 2 notches over me. He'd lost weight, but he had longer arms, bigger body, and he beat the tar out of me. I had to have my nose rebuilt and teeth repaired. It shows you should stay in your weight limit.
How'd you train for that? At a gym?
You run and you hit a punching bag. I was good at that punching bag. I started hitting that before I went in the Navy. I liked boxing. One of my dad's assistants got me started. And I look at these guys nowadays, and they don't do any of the stuff we did. And you're not supposed to hit a guy in the back of the neck. You're not supposed to hit guys in the kidneys. You're not supposed to lean on them if you're tired. You're supposed to stay off the ropes. All that, they do all that stuff nowadays. So boxing nowadays isn't what it was when I was a boxer.
Did you ever have to use boxing while you were in the service or in Vietnam or anything like that? Did you have to use that as self-defense?
No. I taught all 7 kids how to box. I have
you?
them out in the front yard. I bought 12-ounce gloves, and the neighbors thought I was crazy.
That's pretty
But it was
funny.
good. 5 of them went in the military, so the boxing didn't help. You give them self-confidence.
Yeah.
Well, I told you about how they decided collateral duty, where you not only do your own job, but they have you doing whatever needs to be done.
Yeah.
I'm real grateful to the Navy chiefs. I don't know whether you know what a Navy chief is, but that's
I don't.
the highest enlisted rate, and they have a special uniform. And they say the chiefs run the Navy. And they sure helped me out when they told me I had to build a gymnasium and that I had to organize the ship's band and all that stuff. Plus, I was in charge of all the parties and all the tours.
What kind of parties and tours did you come up with?
Well, you hit the museums, you hit the parks, and of course at night you hit a few nightclubs.
Yeah.
And we'd have ship's parties for special occasions. And we found out certain things you had to do, like you had to make sure the troops were dressed properly because they behaved better if they were dressed properly. So you make them wear a good outfit. And then the other thing that we learned, if a fight starts, you have to end it immediately, because if you let it go, the next thing you know, it'll spread out and you'll have a whole bunch of people fighting. So you get on immediately. If there's a fight going on, boom, you get in there and you carry those guys out. You know.
Is there a lot of brawling that went on?
Well, you know what's, when you hit these foreign ports and the guys have got all this pent-up energy, and we have a few problems. Like the Marine Corps likes to fight. They deliberately start stuff when they hit port, and so since I was a medic, I had to sew them up. You know, they come in, I had to sew up their face or take care of their bruised knuckles or whatever. The Marine Corps just loved to fight.
You told me a funny story about the ear. I can't remember what that was related to. Remember? About sewing on the ear?
Oh yeah, we put a foot back together.
Where was this? Let's put it in perspective.
Vietnam.
Okay.
Put a foot back together, and then we got the face we thought in shape, but never had noticed. Some more casualties came in by helicopter, and the other guy ran out to greet the casualties, and I'm finishing up on the patient, and the hospital corpsman says, "What are you going to do about this ear?" Never had noticed it. His ear was hanging down here on his shoulder, you know, but there's a little bit of skin still attached to it, which was good. So I sewed the ear back on, and sewing an ear on is a lot easier than taking out a wisdom tooth.
Yeah. Why?
Because of accessibility. Here you're working in a small area hole, and here you got the whole outside world, you know. Nothing to put an ear back on.
Did that make you, when you went in, did you specifically ask for dentistry when you were thinking about medicine?
Well, my dad was a dentist, so I felt
it.
I would not be accepted by my family unless I became a dentist.
Unless you did the dentist rather than the MD.
Well, the first 2 years is the same. Courses are all the same. And then the last 2 years, you're still taking medical, but you're taking dental. You still take principles of surgery, principles of medicine. And then before I went into dentistry, I did graduate work where I took immunology and parasitology, other junk that you take. So the only course that I lacked toward my MD degree was OBGYN. I had everything else.
Okay.
But then when I interned, I got my OBGYN, so I finally...
So you got everything.
Got it all, yeah.
Now you belong to a number, I think you mentioned, of veterans organizations?
Well, I belong to Association of Naval Aviators, Association of Military Surgeons of the United States, Association of Military Officers that are retired.
Do you do things with people in the organizations, or do you just belong? Like, are you active?
We raise money for families where the husbands been killed, help the children go to school, tell lots of war stories.
Okay, so you socialize with everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Social organizations.
Do you socialize with anybody?
In the Navy League, we sponsor the Sea Cadets. And, I thought Boy Scouting was a good deal, though. I really enjoyed scouting. The principles of scouting. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Do a good turn daily, be prepared. On my honor, I'll do my best to do my duty to God and my country, help other people at all time, and all that kind of stuff. It's great. Great program for young people. And as I said, our kids were Eagle Scouts, and our grandkids are Eagle Scouts. But my wife said, remember the Girl Scouts.
Yeah.
So
and she did that, right?
What's funny is that the Girl Scouts went into more detail on some things like first aid. All we did is have them wrap a few bandages, take them to the fire station. But the girls, they had to memorize a ton of stuff. They had a really rough go to get their first aid merit badge.
Well, I guess that's good. So would you recommend a career in the military?
for me, it was great, although I would have never gone in if it hadn't been for World War II. You know, my dad was a very tough, strict guy, and I had no desire. He wanted to get me in ROTC. I said, I don't want to wear a uniform, and I don't like to march. Well, guess what? World War II went in, and I did a lot of marching, and I wore enlisted uniform and a midshipman uniform and an officer's uniform.
What do you think you would have done if you didn't join the military? You think you'd be a dentist?
No, I would have still gone into either medicine or dentistry.
Just private practice?
That was my goal in life.
Didn't you have a friend that did that? You were telling me he didn't like practicing within the military, and so he...
Oh, yeah.
Who was that?
My roommate in college, he decided to go into dentistry. He was 2 years behind me. He went to the same school. We both have bachelor's degrees from the Teachers College. He went in the Air Force, went to Japan, decided he didn't like the military. He went into private practice in Joplin, Missouri. And there's a lot of cheap land there at the time. He bought all this cheap land. He ended up being the richest guy in the state of Missouri. They call it in Mogul, Missouri, a multi-millionaire. In Joplin, he owned the buildings and the restaurants and everything. Well, here he is in multi, and a storm hit Joplin, Missouri a couple of years ago and wiped the whole town out. So he goes from being the richest guy in the state to being wiped out. So I don't know what's going on now, but
you don't keep in contact.
I hope he had some money in the bank.
Yeah. Hope it wasn't all tied up in land or
Well, the
buildings
first time I tried to contact him, he was in the hospital with pneumonia. And and the last time I haven't been able to really find out what's going on with him. He had 3 children. One became a lawyer, one became a physician, one became a dentist.
Yeah. Sounds like your family,
So
huh?
he did all right, yeah.
Anything else you want to tell us about your years?
Oh, and then he was a politician guy, and he taught me into running for president of the biology club, and he was my campaign manager, and so I became president, and then a couple of years later he became president.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about your long career in the military that you want to get on tape for people? Or about your life?
Well, I'm really happy with the children. They all, 5 went in the military, and 3 retired, and there's 2 at the Pentagon. Now, I've had 3 at the Pentagon. One was involved with the initial Star Wars program, and now one is executive treasurer for the Surgeon General's office. He helped set up field hospitals in the Far East. And the other one, he's the one that got Chip Hand of the Year award. And he was up for stars, and his wife hated the Navy and made him get out, so he threw away his stars. But he makes more money now. He's a retired 06 plus a GS-15 civil service. He's making more money, but it still would have been nice,
Yeah.
Then John was put up for stars, and he couldn't pass physical because he was in an accident where he went flying through the air and tore up his shoulder and his hip and arm. But he's still working. He's holding down a general's billet, but as a civilian. But he's assistant surgeon general there. And he's got a 2-star woman telling him what to do, and a colonel woman that he gets to tell what to do.
Well.
But when he came back from overseas, the general in charge said that John was the only one that knew what was going on with the field hospitals. So he said, "I need you back here. You're the only one that knows what's going on." So John had to go back to combat. And in the meantime, his family is in Germany. His family spent a lot of years in Germany. Now I have another child that's in a job where he makes 4 trips a year to Germany. And he's the one that speaks 6 languages. He stood one in his class in Portuguese and Spanish in both high school and college. And then while I was on active duty, he took German, Italian, and French. And the guy speaks it like a native. What's funny, he was a Fulbright scholar at the University of Lisbon. And he married a girl from Brazil, and then one of his principal instructors at West Point was from Brazil. So they said, "Ron, you speak perfect Portuguese. but you speak it with a Brazilian accent.
That's pretty funny. And I know that you have a picture of your family that you're going to... Yeah, so this is your family.
This is my family, the 9 of us. This is the daughter that's a West Point grad. She's also a graduate of the Naval Postgraduate School and a jump master. She was bragging about how she got a star on her jump wings. You know, she outdid her husband. Now she's raising 4 children. She retired as commanding officer, as I said, of the Army Information Technology School. The jump master is the one in charge of the airplane, and they get a star on her wing.
Okay.
Like the C-130, she's in charge of all the paratroopers on board.
Okay, but they don't actually jump.
Yes.
They jump too?
Yeah, you got to be a jumper first before
Okay.
you become a jump master.
Okay.
Because you're in charge, you got to be trained.
But when you're in charge, you're not jumping.
Yeah, you're jumping with the troops.
Oh, okay.
You're the last one to go out.
Oh, okay.
You make sure all your troops get out. And then, in fact, she had a guy, a 250-pound guy, that got snarled in his parachute, and he'd be dead if she hadn't unsnarled him.
How'd she do it?
I don't know the whole story, but that's
pretty cool.
The story. She's quite a gal. She was student body president in school and co-captain of her basketball team. And then she was a junior Miss finalist, and when they had the junior Miss pageant, this guy now is executive secretary of the Surgeon General's office for the Department of the Army at the Pentagon. This guy, he's the Navy guy that got Ship Hand of the Year award for the Atlantic Fleet, and he's also at the Pentagon in Surface Warfare Combat Department. This is a guy that speaks 6 languages. He's a West Point grad. He has 2 master's degrees in business, MIM, MBA, and he's currently working for a company that that does a lot of work in Germany. This guy is the guy that worked in the initial Star Wars program at the Pentagon. And then my this daughter is an emergency room nurse. She had charge of a hospital, and so she got tired of hiring and firing people, so she decided to revert back to being a nurse, and she's an emergency room nurse. She has 2 boys that one graduated from Stanford, and he played football, and they beat USC when USC was one in the nation. And had a son-in-law that played football for USC, and his team beat my son-in-law's team. I thought that was kind of funny. And the other boy is going to Rice, and he's made over 200 tackles, and he's a junior, and the NFL is looking at him. If he doesn't go NFL, he's talking about a master's in sports medicine. And Sandy's my oldest daughter. She's executive vice president of a multi-million-dollar construction firm. And what's funny, she worked her way through USC as a waitress, and she waitressed 11 years. She said she liked meeting men. And now, after 11 years, but then she worked for the Shrine Football Office 10 years, and she ran golf and tennis tournaments for USC for 25 years, so she has a background. But now she's she's vice president of a multi-million-dollar construction firm that builds for Vegas and Disneyland, and they paint buildings, and her husband's name and her name are on 6 buildings at USC. They donate a lot of money to the football team and the band. This was a gal that was Harbor Queen, and she's the one that got bicentennial most photogenic in a beauty pageant in 1976. So my wife didn't like my pushing beauty contest. She thought it was pretty superficial, but I passed it.
And those 2 lovely people?
And this guy started out as a Navy corpsman, and then he went to Naval Academy, briefly a gunnery officer in the Korean War, and then a dental officer in the Vietnam War. And in the city, I've been past president of City Council Advisory Committee, and a member of the board for the Chamber of Commerce. I've been Citizen of the Year twice. There's only 2 of us have done that. The other guy is a Marine officer. We've been Citizen of the Year for the city of Port Hueneme for our work with youth. Mine scouting, his Boys and Girls Club. And let's see, and then Military Citizen of the Year. We both have been Citizen of the Year for the city, and then Military Citizen for our work with youth, young people. And my wife, elementary school teacher, and she's past president of the American Association of University Women. 3 times. There's only been 2 women that have done that. They raise money to send women to college. And a mother of 7 children, made sure they all got through college, and 5 had master's degrees, and 1 went to medical school. And I'm so proud of this woman because I was gone a lot. I was gone, in the Navy, and she kept these kids going and made sure they studied and did they did their, not only their scholastic stuff, but they all went out for sports, football, basketball, and swimming, and then she pushed being leadership training. So that's how, 2 were student body presidents, 2 class presidents, and then presidents of clubs. And so she pushed, and then sports. So she pushed scholarship first, and athletics, and then leadership. And that's what got them scholarships. And I was so lucky to get this gal. She was, as I said, she was the same height, weight, and age as Marilyn Monroe when I met her. And not only got a beauty, but a very intelligent and hard-working girl. I mean, I got it all. I feel so lucky. She's had to put up with me for 62 years now.
Oh, I don't think she'd see it that way. Well, you definitely have a life to be proud of, and a very rich life that you have led.
I'm so proud of that woman back there too.
Why don't we bring this woman over here and put her on tape? What do you think? You want to introduce this lady on
this
your...
This is my sweetheart of 62 years, Rosalie, mother of 7 children, grandmother of 19, and great-grandmother of 4. And she can do everything. She can dance. She's smarter than I am, stronger than I am.
But I don't dance like he does.
And I was telling the story about how I thought I was the mechanical wizard of the family, and I couldn't get the TV fixed the other night, and my wife fixed the TV. I couldn't believe it. I'm an amateur. I have a licensed radio guy. I have an amateur radio license. I used to build my own radio gear. Here I couldn't fix the TV, and she fixed it.
Well, she probably had to do a lot while you were out.
Oh, yeah, I was going a lot. And, yeah, she ran this house and got the kids raised and through college. I can't believe all that this woman did. I am so lucky to have her.
Well, my daughter, my Army daughter, was telling me, well, you push such and such a button, and try that, and so on. And so I was just punching buttons till it finally worked. And that way I didn't have to wait until the next morning to
Yeah, I
watch
call the TV people. I said, hey, I can't get this thing working. They said, well, we'll call you tomorrow morning and let you know when we're coming out. So then they called. I said, well, you guys are too late. My wife fixed it.
What did they do? Did
They
laugh?
laughed. They thought it was funny.
Do you remember meeting him? Do you remember when you first met him?
Oh, of course she remembered.
Oh, yes, we were in college.
She came walking through the door of the library, and I was bending over, talking to someone over at a table, and I looked out, and here comes this gorgeous, long blonde hair, big blue eyes, and perfect figure, and I'd never seen anyone that pretty before, and I couldn't believe she was in the area. And then she came over to the table, and she smiled and said something to the guy I was talking to, and I thought they knew each other. And then I found out they didn't know each other. And then she needed a ride downtown, and I said, well, I got my little 41 Chevy outside. Well, I thought I was going to get her alone. Instead, she had some people with her. And I got them downtown, and they decided to buy ice cream cones or something, and I was the only one that had any money. That was funny. And then
Clever.
Yeah.
And then she lived out on the farm, and it was going to school. Anyway, I drove out to the farm, and she's standing on a ladder with a bandana over her head painting. And her mother said, if he still likes you after seeing you at your worst, he must really be serious.
Really? And did you notice him right away?
Oh, yes, I saw him. I thought he was a little on the loud side.
She still thinks that. No change there.
Right. Not too inhibited, too.
No, she's conservative, laid back, and I'm loud, and I'm make all. She said, "Why do you always feel like you have to be the center of attention?" I said, "Well, because that's my personality."
And he's a better dancer, I guess, huh?
Oh, that's the way he dances.
Wilder dancer.
We have the grandson that just recently graduated from Old Dominion College, who went to college under the Marine ROTC. And when it was for his graduation, the aunt on the other side said, well, he looks like his grandfather, Billy, but he acts like Bill, with, dancing that way. And
Oh.
he likes to do musical shows and that sort of thing. So,
Was it difficult raising all those kids when he was away?
well,
He's very proud of you for that.
I had taught school, and I had had as many as 40 students in my room, and then I mean, you had to keep discipline, and but do it. You couldn't be physical about it, and oh, you get through it somehow. The Lord sees you through. So nowadays, when we moved to California and the children were going to school, I couldn't get over how it was expected of the parents to come up and help and run off papers for the next day's work. And my goodness, I never had that kind of.
Yeah, I'm still attracted to this girl.
Well, I just want to say to both of you, and particularly thank you for all your years of service, and for you for supporting him through all those years of service, and both of you for encouraging another generation to serve.
We're the Seabees of the Navy, we can build and we can fight. We'll pave our way to victory and guard it day and night. We promise and we'll remember the 7th of December. We're the Seabees of the Navy, bees of the 7 seas.